The race for U.S. Senate heats up, and the state budget could take another hit. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me today, got a couple of State House types, which is always good. Andy Maloney is back. He is State House Bureau Chief for the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin. Welcome.
Good to be back.
And a first-time visitor to our show, Emilee Fannon, a State House reporter for WCIA here in Springfield, station based in Champaign, but serves the Central Illinois communities. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And
we often talk about the state, but today, federal stuff first, just because the federal race for U.S. Senate, one of the biggies after president on our ballots coming up in November. Mark Kirk, Tammy Duckworth. Andy, how's it looking?
Well, we always knew it was going to be a tough race, hotly contested. Dems are counting on this one if they want any chance of winning back the Senate, but you had some more sort of crossfire between the two candidates very recently. You had Mark Kirk's comments, obviously, to the State Journal-Register editorial board saying, calling the money for Iran sort of drug dealer in chief.
He said we don't want the president looking like the drug dealer in chief, which he said at our editorial board. I put in a column, and all of a sudden, lots of people noticed.
Right. So got a lot of national coverage, as you could tell us about. And then Tammy Duckworth, Congresswoman challenging Kirk, comes back and calls him unhinged, says he has this history of making sort of extreme claims, and she got her own blowback from that because, as we know, Senator Kirk suffered a stroke, and there was controversy about that.
Right, and he, I guess, up in Bloomington Normal at an agriculture event said, challenged her as if she was making fun of stroke victims.
Right.
Anyway, Emilee, you've been covering some of this.
Right. Well, with the unhinged and the drug dealer thing, I actually spoke with her this week, and her answer to the unhinged is that it was a Southern news article that labeled him that first. So her rebuttal was that someone else said it, so I said it after them. Didn't really go into depth after that, but it seems like it's another, just like with Governor Rauner and Mike Madigan, it's a lot of name calling, low blows a little bit. And her response today to the drug dealer in chief, she just ultimately just wants Kirk to apologize. I think someone from his staff came out with a statement, but he still hasn't publicly said it himself, so she's still kind of...
Something may have changed. Last I heard, he was just saying, what's really unhinged is for the president to, give Iran this money, but, at least initially, at least for a number of days, was not taking anything back. Mm-hmm. So we'll see where that goes.
And we should note, too, that it was the Political Action Committee from former Rep. Gabby Giffords who came out and endorsed Senator Kirk, and so it's just
right. And she's was it Arizona Congresswoman who was shot and then is for gun control. And because Kirk is a incumbent member of the U.S. Senate, even though he's a Republican, he's been quite positive for gun control. Right. Also being representing the Chicago area, even though he's from the northern suburbs up in Highland Park. That was something I think that organization said, we know Tammy Duckworth would also do well by us, but Mark Kirk is an incumbent, and we like to back incumbents who back us.
Right, and came out after the Newtown shootings and voted for some gun control measures in Congress, which I think that they took into account in that decision to come out and endorse him.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting because with Donald Trump being on top of the ticket for the Republicans, and of course Hillary Clinton has her own problems as the top of the ticket for the Democrats, but I think when you look at all of the polls, Illinois is just considered a blue state, so people think that this is maybe an easy pickup for Democrats in the U.S. Senate this year. On the other hand, Mark Kirk, even though he initially had said he would support the nominee, even if Trump is against Trump and says Trump, has said bad things and he's not for him, and he Tammy Duckworth has made a joke about, I was surprised to not see him at our convention because he's trying to be such a Democrat. So
right,
how's the Trump effect going in Illinois? Our governor still doesn't talk about Trump, correct?
He still won't. No, I mean, even few days ago. He still wouldn't answer it when I asked.
Yeah.
He kind of still just laughs it off and smiles. So it's just kind of a strange reaction from him every single time you do ask.
It is a strange year. I know that question was asked of him at the state fair, and Emilee, you did 9 days at the fair? Is that
I did do 9 days at the fair.
Those TV people work awfully hard.
Yeah,
You don't know that.
it was a long week and a half there.
So
but
what are you hearing? Attendance, I know we had also had a story in the SJR about some vendors complaining that sales were down. And I know that the gate price went up, general admission for just most adults most days to $10. What are you hearing about?
Overall,
things?
it was just a lot of bad luck and just bad year for the fair. I mean, you had a flood the first full day of the fair, and then you had a power outage that took out. I talked to 2 vendors whose food was just completely ruined. They lost, a couple $1,000s because of that. You had a $3 increase. It was $7 last year, now $10 this year. So there was a lot of these factors. Some you can't control, which was Mother Nature, which some vendors were understanding about. The power outage upset some people, but the admission price, you can't do much. A lot of them were just extremely disappointed. One guy I talked to has been coming for 15 years. He's not coming back, and he said he'd be lucky to walk away with $1,000 in profit.
After 10 days?
Yeah, after 10 days. And that was really disheartening to me because, a lot of these fair vendors have been coming for 30, 40, 50 years. And to see, some of them who've been coming that long just saying, I'm not coming back is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if things will change. It's been interesting. I know the Governor Rauner in his first year, a year ago, was asked, why are we having a fair, when the state's in these doldrums? Well, we're celebrating agriculture and there's all these things. And he really seems to have gotten into it, including the cowboy shirt and the whole thing.
Oh yeah, different get up every day.
When he's out, the cowboy hat,
big belt buckle.
the boots, the motorcycle over there. He seems to like it. He has unilaterally worked with, he at least has approved of people working with who happen to be contacted by his staff at least somewhere along the way, and forming a foundation to raise money to fix the building and grounds at the fair in Springfield, and also DuQuoin, which the other state fair is going on. So he seems to want to continue this no matter what's going on. Is that the same impression you get?
Yeah, it's something like you said. Maybe at first there was sort of a willingness to change it, or a reluctance to kind of be that involved. But now I think anytime, especially in this region, the sort of notion that the state fair kind of plays a big part in the culture, and not only the city's culture but the state's culture. I think it's important to a lot of people, even if people walked away from it disappointed, whether they were vendors or just families who were going out there to have fun. I think it's important to a lot of people to...
Maybe one year we'll have 10 days of good weather.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I talk to people. I mean, it rains every year. Everyone knows that. I haven't been in Springfield that long, but that's just what I hear. Every year it's going to be rain. It's kind of just this cloud that sits there for the week of whenever it's going to happen.
That's right.
But with the foundation, I did find what was very surprising is that when they walked around the fair and looked at damages, $180 million is estimated that needs to be worked on.
Yeah, I think that's through both fairgrounds.
That is both
Springfield
fairgrounds.
and DuQuoin.
And I just thought, I mean,
That's a lot.
you don't notice it right at first, but I did some race tracking stories and how they're dealing with budget issues themselves and prizes when they compete. The barns there are literally just falling apart.
Yeah.
And I think, most people might not know from walking down the street getting a corn dog, well, the fair looks great to me, but a little bit farther back you look, it's not too great.
Yeah, I know the governor.
Sidewalks too.
When the governor, I think it was a press conference some months ago when
he had it right in front of that.
It was in
red
front of
barn.
one of the barns with the roof that's kind of falling in and kind of caved. So, well, we will see where that goes. And I know that the figures will come out later after the DuQuoin Fair about how many people actually showed up to both
So then we
this
can
year.
really compare and contrast.
Then, and we'll see, those numbers. Sometimes people always question the numbers, but I'm sure that under the new administration, they'll be totally accurate, and everybody will know exactly how many people went through each gate. Andy, talked at the opening of the show about the state budget could take another hit, and I was talking about the teachers' retirement system. And as we tape this, the meeting is supposed to happen at the end of the week. Their estimated rate of return for the savings that they have, and what does that mean?
Yeah, largest pension fund, I believe, in the state. The teachers at least covers the most people. And they were talking about lowering what they expected their rate of return on the investments to be. Last time they did that, I believe, a couple years ago, they said 8% to 7.5%.
Right.
And what that results in might not sound like that much on a percentage basis, but that was roughly $200 million.
That the state had to put into the pension fund extra. And,
Exactly.
And current law says, if the TRS says, the Teachers Retirement System says, here's what we expect to earn and here's what our actuaries say the state now needs to provide, they just have to appropriate the money. They have to put it in
Right,
there.
required contributions. And so there was a memo within the Rauner administration that says this is going to cause more devastating cuts and increase the need for new revenue. So this is, I think it shows, maybe a lot of people don't realize it, even sometimes we don't realize it, but the importance of kind of these predictions, right? A lot of budgeting and planning in state government is all about what they expect to happen in the future, and as we know, that's not always set in stone.
Right. On the other hand, when you think about it, like the bank accounts are paying sometimes less than 1%,
Right.
and when the teachers retire, and a good investment portfolio might make 10, but I guess around the country, 7.5 is now looked at as too rosy, and so you want them to be realistic. But I think the governor's people also wanted to possibly change the rules or maybe get legislation to say they wouldn't have to put all the extra money in right away, but be able to layer it in over a few years. On the other hand, everybody agrees the pension problem over the years through many governors and legislatures has been when they've skipped pension payments or not paid enough in, and that's why we have this more than $100 million in liability over the life of the plan. So,
and some experts have said, I think even something like 4%, maybe a little more, is maybe more accurate, and we've seen pension funds across the country start to consider this. So we'll know more, as you said, in a day or so.
Well, we know that the governor would be loving to sign some pension reform legislation, although that's also difficult with our Constitution that says benefits once granted cannot be taken back from state employees and retirees. But he has been signing some bills. One was up in the Chicago area to fight gun trafficking. One was to help ex-offenders get jobs. It's interesting because, Emilee, it seems that one of the areas of agreement between some Democrats and Republicans and this governor, who has said that over, I think, 10 years he wants to lower the number of people in prison by a quarter if he can, is prison reform
Right.
and criminal justice reform so that people don't go to jail for prolonged periods for things that they may not. So how's bill signings going?
Well, it's like you said, it was pretty neat to see that there was bipartisan support on a lot of these gun bills that we had, because when they were in the House and the Senate, not a lot of these shootings were happening. It was towards the end tail, when all these mass shootings started happening one after another. And it's kind of nice to see that we kind of planned ahead and then afterwards took action. But it was interesting how it is part of his plan, and he's actually doing something about it, because he pitches all these ideas. And with the ex-offenders, it's pretty interesting that we didn't have anything in place, because other states have stuff in place where you commit a crime when you're 16, 18 years old. It shouldn't hold against you 30 years later. There was a woman in Decatur who was kind of the face of this one, who went to Richland Community College, committed a crime when she was 17 years old, robbed a Subway, served her time, and went off to college, changed her whole life around, graduated, started a nursing program, and then they denied her license.
Because she was a convicted felon.
Because she was a convicted felon. So that was, it's just strange how, maybe she didn't read the fine print, or while she's in this program, someone, mentioned, hey, have you ever been an ex-felon? You can't be a nurse. It was sad to see, but the joy on her face this week was just, she was in tears,
and
because Governor Rauner signed the measure into law, and with a bunch of other reforms that, gun trafficking was also an issue. And I found it interesting when I went to a local gun shop in Springfield. It's the Springfield Shooting Center. They always have their views on guns, of course. You think it's one way, but a majority of the time, they say all these gun laws aren't going to change anything. And they were actually really for gun trafficking, because they do see it as a big
Limits
problem.
on gun trafficking.
Yeah. It's a huge problem.
Yeah, and I know
especially from majority of the guns they're saying is coming from Indiana,
Right.
because you don't have to have identification card.
That's right.
I think there are two ways to look at it, and as you pointed out astutely, when you look at criminal justice reform compared to budgeting or anything political, you have kind of the back and forth and the sort of the gamesmanship. And when you compare it to that, seeing some of these bills, even though some on the criminal justice reform side say they're not really enough, they're not going to get the governor to his 25% reduction over 10 years, et cetera. When you just compare it to everything else that's been going on, it looks like bipartisan compromise that's moving the state in what many say is a productive direction. But when you look at it on its own, like I said, there are still those who are saying, well, the gun trafficking law, you're increasing a criminal penalty, and even though shootings in Chicago are a big problem, do we want to make people serve more prison time in general for those types of crimes? On the other side, these bills that allow people to re-enter the workforce, there's one also that allows juveniles to expunge arrest records when those arrests don't result in convictions. The criminal justice folks are saying this is good stuff, but it's not going to get us to the 25%. So we have to see, I think, where the governor's Criminal Justice Commission recommends the state go next on that.
Yeah, well, I know he had appeared with that group in Springfield, and certainly seems committed to that, which again is a point of kind of getting along with the Democrats, although when he did the gun trafficking bill signing in Chicago,
Right.
he was with the Republican leaders of the House and Senate, but nobody from the, and state
city
police.
or
Yeah.
the Chicago
But the
police.
mayor of Chicago, who he's had various feuds with
Right.
over budgets and over Chicago public schools, they weren't there, and Chicago police weren't there, but everybody kind of agrees on the need for the bill. Just back to something political and court-wise, David Gill, people might remember him from the 13th Congressional District, one of the big ones that runs from Champaign, Bloomington, Springfield. He ran in 2012 as a Democrat against Rodney Davis in the first year of that new district, and he only lost by 1,000 votes out of about 300,000 cast. This year he put himself, or tried to get himself on the ballot as an independent. And just this last week, federal judge Sue Myerscough heard a case and issued an injunction saying the State Board of Elections should let him on the ballot as an independent. He was supposed to collect, I think it's about 10,700 signatures. His lawyer, Sam Canman from Springfield, were saying nobody, basically in 100 years, just about has had to collect that many signatures to run for Congress anywhere in the country. They only have a 90-day window to collect those signatures. Gill said he gathered 5,000 himself. That's a lot of signatures when you think about going just on your block.
Yeah.
And they said it's an unreasonable number because the Democrats and Republicans running for that office, while they have to go through a primary, they only have to gather like 740 signatures. And he had to collect 10,000. Collected 11,000 some. Many were thrown off in an initial review after objections were filed. They claimed that he had perhaps more than 8,000 or 8,500 valid ones, far more than any candidate for all kinds of other things. And Judge Myerscough said, let him on the ballot. So we have a three-way race. There's a guy named Mark Wickland, is a Democrat from Decatur, who hasn't yet raised a lot of money, like 20,000. Rodney Davis, of course, is the incumbent now in a district that really was, the 13th could go either way, although Davis has worked it hard. He's a Republican, former staffer for John Shimkus. And he's got more than $1 million in his fund, and Wickland's got like 20,000 raised total. We'll see if Dr. Gill moves, and he can be an aggressive campaigner.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, the district has gone previously for Romney, although it's been close in past elections.
I'm not exactly,
No,
but
it's a
it
close.
seems, I think it's probably, especially with Rodney Davis there, he's been interestingly, hardworking and Republican, so it kind of gives that under a lot of rural territory. Mm-hmm. But it also, as I said, David Gill was even for single-payer health care in 2012 before the Bernie Sanders movement, and he almost, he got like 49% of the vote. So it'll be interesting to see where that one goes. Rod Blagojevich is trying, recently got named or resentenced to 14 years in federal prison, and we just heard this week that they plan on appealing that decision from the judge in Chicago. Any thoughts on where that goes?
I wasn't surprised when I saw that. It was a bit of a show, I thought, though, when he was behind the video camera, and it wasn't really much discussed about his sentence. It was more about his hair. all the headlines was, oh my gosh, it's the white hair.
Well, we haven't seen, yeah.
No one's really, we got the sketch of it, floating around on social media. I thought that was pretty funny, but yeah, it's no surprise to me, I guess I would say.
And it's no surprise either that, of course, his attorneys are going to try and do that because they're going to try and exhaust every last remedy he's got. But it is a Hail Mary, to say the least.
Right. Well, he did get 14 years, which is a lot more than people get for what some would consider more serious crimes, in the sense that he didn't make a dime, he would say that. But Judge Zagel, who sentenced him, also said, you were governor, you were saying all these horrible things on tape, and you are an example because when you're that high up and doing things for yourself, trying to sell Barack Obama's seat, et cetera, in the U.S. Senate was at least the initial charge. That kind of thing. Emilee, you mentioned as we talked before we started the show that Mike Frerichs, the state treasurer, has been on a kick for some period of time trying to get the governor to move on legislation which has passed the legislature to say that insurance companies shouldn't have to wait for a claim to pay life insurance. They should be able to go over some lists of people who have died in the state through various records, and then let families or beneficiaries know that money is there, because a lot of money sits on the table.
Yeah, a lot of money was basically just sitting there, and he found it. He saw the problem with it, and he took proper action. I think it's a great bill that he put in front of the General Assembly, because a lot of families, you might not know. I mean, I might not know that people have put me down as a beneficiary, and they're, I'm not going to go to their funeral. I'm not going to know that they left me thousands or more than that. So it's money that is rightfully owed to these people, and as Frerichs says, it's unfair that these people don't know. He says it's unfair that these insurance companies aren't reaching out to these people and kind of banking off their profits.
Yeah, if I read it correctly, Kemper Insurance is one that he's tried to get to move forward.
Correct.
Some companies are doing it voluntarily, but I believe the word from Kemper is that, well, we expect some people not to get paid, which is why our premiums are lower, but I don't think that's what Mr. Frerichs, the treasurer, wants to hear from the insurance companies.
And it's interesting, he's doing kind of all these, I know last week he was in Chicago, this week he was in Decatur. He's doing these hearings with people who can kind of dig more in depth into the bill that already passed. I talked to him, I believe last week, and he said, there are some minor problems I might want to change. He didn't go into specifics, but he's looking to further this even more, past the bill that was just signed.
We'll see. I don't know if any of us are experts on healthcare, but some new numbers have come out from the Department of Insurance that people who get insurance through the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, a lot of premiums are going up and some companies are leaving. So this is just, I predict, will be a continuing issue in campaigns for president and Congress as we go forward. This last week in Springfield, in the same room for a while, we had a Democratic meeting. There weren't a lot of people there because a lot of members of the Democratic State Central Committee met or just sent in their proxy votes because we had a list of electors for the campaign. So this was just a ceremonial thing. Each party picks the people who, if Illinois goes for the presidential candidate of their party, then I believe it's in December when the electors cast their official ballots. These are the people who will be there. And Mike Madigan, and the Speaker of the House and Chairman of the Democratic Party, and John Cullerton, the President of the Senate, were both there. And Madigan spoke to the press and talked once again about how even though Governor Rauner doesn't talk about Donald Trump, they are joined at the hip. I guess this is what we're going to be hearing from here through the election season.
I mean, we've heard it before, so it wasn't surprising to me, but when I think someone even questioned him, or how do you know? Where has Governor Rauner said that he supports Trump? I don't think anyone.
Well,
did someone find? Did you dig a little deeper?
At the Republican State Convention in Peoria a few months ago, Governor Rauner was on stage and said we have to support the whole ticket. So people take that as support for Donald Trump.
And that was, I think, prompted by the possibility even, maybe it wasn't official that Trump was going to be the nominee, but that was the implication. Would you support a Donald Trump presidential ticket? And whether he or anybody else in that position thought that it would actually happen, a lot of them have said, we're going to support our party's nominee.
The governor, I guess, was also in Southern Illinois and said something to the effect, and I'm quoting Capital Facts here, our friend Rich Miller, maybe it was in another publication that he's not that involved when he's asked about local races for legislature. But then I also noticed the governor has put something like $14 million transferred into the Republican Party so far this year, and the governor is the one doing that. Of course, the governor's people will say, and Republicans will say, well, you know, the Democrats have all the unions behind them, so we're just matching up. But what about this one person putting millions of dollars? And it just kind of changes the balance of anything we've ever seen.
Yeah, and we saw it in primary season, especially too, with the governor obviously not being reluctant to put campaign spending at the forefront during political.
And then when you ask him about it, it's always, well, I don't talk about politics here.
Yeah.
And then it's last question, and I'm not talking about it there. So.
Yeah. Well, with the whole money issue too, when Democrats met it was Democrat Day at State Fair, they had their own kind of mini convention with, you know, who's up for the seats on the Democratic ticket. And I talked to Democrats, hey, you know, Republicans got all this money. What's your rebuttal? And Senator Scott Bennett put it in an interesting way.
From Champaign?
Champaign. Mm-hmm. He's a senator from Champaign. He put it interesting. It doesn't cost $1 to knock on someone's door. You know, Republicans can have all the money. Clearly, we've known that with Governor Rauner's support, they're going to have millions. I mean, that man has a lot of money. But despite that, you know, Democrats aren't throwing in the towel.
Okay, well, we are just about out of time. I should say that within the last week or so, there was a fight at Pontiac Prison. 6 guards were hurt, some inmates were hurt. We just hope things like that don't get any worse. There was a little spatting back and forth between the administration and the guards union as to who's at fault. And I remember a horrible situation in 1978 when 3 guards were killed, and I was working in Bloomington at the time, and that happened in Pontiac. And let's just hope all kinds of things work so that this doesn't get any worse. With that, Andy Maloney, Emilee Fannon, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.